Welcome to the Long COVID podcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. I am delighted to be joined today by Ivor Clark, who is here to share his recovery story. So again, as with all recovery stories, this is one person's experience, but there is so much that we can learn from every single experience. So I'm super excited to hear Ivor's story, what worked, what didn't work, all of the juicy details. So welcome. It's so lovely to have you here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you, Jackie. Nice to see you and speak to you.
It is. It's lovely to connect. So let's start off with, what was life like before? So in that kind of run up to your illness, what did life look like for you?
Well, going further back, I think it's worth highlighting that I had played American football at a relatively high level competitively. I played in British finals, I played for Great Britain and such like, so I've got quite an athletic background. I had retired a few years before I contracted COVID. I had moved through from the west coast of Scotland through to the east coast to live with my wife. So we originally lived in Portobello, where she's from, and we've moved to Musselburgh. So it's her and my wife's called Sarah. I shouldn't call her her, should I? It's not very polite. And then my two stepdaughters, Charlotte and Lucia. So it made sense for me to move through and live with them. We now live in Musselburgh, and we've got Pirate the dog, and we've got Amber the cat, and there's also a leopard gecko that sits in a tank close to me here as well. So I was working full time. I was also health coaching part-time and just supporting my family, I suppose. And then it was 2023 that I was impacted by COVID. And I also got a urinary tract infection around about pretty much at the same time, which led me to take antibiotics, a couple of courses of antibiotics, which may have given me a false sense of recovery, which obviously, as you will be well aware of, then, if you do too much, then you can feel pretty bad afterwards. So that was early stages and then leading into it.
Yeah. So yeah, as you say, that there was quite a lot going on there, and actually your COVID infection that led to long COVID was actually relatively far through the pandemic. You'd survived sort of 3 years of it before it got you, kind of thing.
Yes.
And interesting as well that you say about the antibiotics, because, we do now understand a little bit more about, what they do to our gut, for example, and the importance of the gut in our, immune system and our nervous system. And, not that you shouldn't take antibiotics if you need them, but also that they can have this impact. So interesting that kind of all happened together, and then kaboom. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about your sort of your COVID illness. Sort of maybe the initial illness, and then how that kind of led into long COVID and what your sort of main symptoms there were.
Yes.
If you can talk us through that a wee bit.
Of course. Well, as you say, it was a few years after the initial, pandemic hit us. Sarah and I had both had COVID previously, and we weren't badly impacted. Bad cold, flu-like symptoms, probably for a week at the very most. As is usual, my wife got better before me, so she then thinks it's a bit of man flu and such like. So that time in 2023, the second time that we were impacted, it was it just shows how far on. Like we'd got married in 2021, and there was points in that at that stage that we didn't know if the wedding was going to go ahead because and then it was all masks and it was all different you know rules and regulations that they were flinging in. Um, so yeah, it just shows 2 years down the line that in June 2023 when we were impacted, we hadn't even realised at first that we had COVID. And then she went out a dog walk, came back in and said, we had COVID a few days ago. And it was suddenly a realization that that's why we weren't well. So, as I say, I had a UTI at the same time. So, a couple of courses of antibiotics. And I was, after probably maybe 6 weeks, I suppose, 4 to 6 weeks, I was starting to feel better. And I still remember the point I was through back on the West Coast, spending time with my dad because he's got Parkinson's. So it was giving my mum a break. She was away. She was away on holiday. And I was through looking after my dad, finished the second course of antibiotics, thinking I was on the road to recovery, feeling a lot better. Came back through here, decided for some obscure reason that I was rearranged the office at home. And I also went outside and there was a massive rotten plant out in the garden. And I ripped that up and put it in the garden waste, and it filled the whole garden waste bin. And my youngest stepdaughter, who was probably about 10 or 11 at the time, was outside with me during the time. She's now 13, so she doesn't spend as much time with me now. She's a teenager. But she was out there watching me thinking, you've definitely got better. And then for the next few weeks, my condition gradually deteriorated. I was moving a lot slower. It just wasn't, I was just getting tired so quickly. I was having it when I was going out for a dog walk. I was coming back in and having to lie down. But I was trying to push through. Like I think you've said before, you don't fully understand the condition and how it. At that point, it wasn't clear that I had long COVID. There was different doctor appointments. I was getting blood tests, which were coming back as showing as being normal, which I definitely didn't feel normal. And there was no clarity about what the situation was. And then one of the doctors said, you've got long COVID, but we can't call it that until you've been at the 12-week stage. So I spent another few weeks where we'll try go out to, it would have been August 2023. So it was the Edinburgh Festival was happening. So we had 2 or 3 shows we were going to, and we're still going out. So I just drove and parked close by and walked to them. But I suppose everything I did at that stage was having a detrimental ongoing impact as to how I was feeling. And then towards the end of August, I was best man at my friend's wedding. And at that stage, I was pretty bad. We'd driven through, it was back through on the west coast of Scotland, driven back through the night before. I'd done too much the night before, try finding somewhere to eat and such like. So I hadn't got a good sleep. Next day, I had to get help putting my kilt on. The guy who was getting married had to help me. I was popping paracetamol to get me through the day. I was just sitting down as much as I could. And then from the start of September, I was off work for 6 months. And that was when the condition really, really hit. And initially, the plan was just to do absolutely nothing. And I tried to do that for a couple of weeks, and it made zero impact. And then, started looking into so many different things that could potentially help. But at that stage, early doors, I really didn't know what I was dealing with at all.
Yeah. And it's a really scary thing, isn't it? When you go from somebody who is just normal.
Yeah,
You don't think about it, do you? You're just you. You're just who you are. You're doing what you do and you're living your life. And then suddenly suddenly you're not, and even like standing up, which is something we would have just taken for granted without a second thought, is something that you actually can't do, and you have to go and sit down, and it is a very, very scary thing to happen, particularly because doctors are often not particularly helpful. They don't really know what to do. um what I'm interested in is, when I became ill in March 2020, there was very little, long COVID didn't actually even exist yet at that point. Long COVID kind of grew up with me, as I sort of got, my sort of experience moved into long COVID as it sort of started to be called that. Obviously, by 2023, when you got ill, long COVID had existed for several years. But what was the kind of support like around it? Your doctor obviously diagnosed you with it, but was there any kind of like, you have long COVID, here are some things that might help you? Or was it, you have long COVID, don't really know what to do, and you sort of start Googling, which is often not helpful. What was that kind of like for you? We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us.
The support from the medical community wasn't great. I did end up finding a GP who was amazing, that she was putting me forward for more blood tests. She put me forward for a chest x-ray and an ECG and such like. And then she also put me forward for long COVID support through Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland. They had advice line that was available. And funnily enough, I had been given their details and they'd had email exchanges with them, and they'd sent me information about pacing, which at that stage I didn't have any understanding about. And, it was a foreign word to me. But further down the line, once it had shown the chest x-ray and the ECG that everything, as per the blood tests, that everything was, in inverted commas, normal, then they could then look at what the next stages would be. And actually, I remember her phoning me a couple of times because I'd gone in. She said, she didn't know anything about long COVID. She was going to look into it. I thought I'd been forgotten about. And I think it was on Friday night at 6:30 in the evening. She gave me a call and she said, "I'm so sorry. I meant to get in touch with you earlier in the week." And I think it was the previous week I'd been in to see her. She says, "I'm so sorry. I've looked into it, but this is what I could do." And she advised me about, we have to go down this route and tick certain things off, and then I can put you forward for support. And it wasn't until February the following year, 2024, that the advice line, Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland long COVID advice line, somebody got in touch. And that was amazing, having that advocate, having that person who I could see as a coach to talk me through. But having support is so important, because I can understand why it impacts people from a mental health standpoint. I'm relatively positive, and I did a lot of journaling during the time period, but I can't remember. I think it was potentially the employee assistance program through my work. I'd spoken to them on a few occasions as well. And as somebody said, if you're having a bad day, then that's okay. If you're in a rubbish mood, just admit it to yourself. So, there was a few times when I had a little tear in my eye, a little cry. And that was definitely the case when Kat from the advice line first called me, because it felt like this is somebody that could understand what I was going through, and they'd supported so many other people. So it was a relief that I could have somebody that was an advocate that could be there to guide me. But yeah, it took a while to get to that stage.
Yeah, and you're so right about that, the power of support and being heard and listened to. And it sounds like, your doctor actually did then go and do some research and find things that were helpful to you. But even in the first instance, when she didn't know what she was doing, she listened to you and, took on board what you were saying and, that there is so much power in that, and of course then having other people around you as well. I think it's amazing for you, and it maybe took some of the burden off your family as well, because we forget, I think, when we're so in it, we're so wrapped up in how awful our own experience is, because it is, and I don't think there's any blame there. But I certainly didn't really appreciate how difficult things were for my partner while I was ill, and he was basically looking after me and doing everything, and also having to deal with the kind of mental burden of all of that himself. So yeah, having other people around you as well, I think, it's important, so you're not then relying so heavily on someone else. And it gives them a little bit of space, hopefully, as well. I don't know if that was what you experienced.
Definitely. And I can understand how you feel. You've discussed Malky there, and I forget the same with Sarah, that she had to pick up everything I was unable to
Mm,
do, whether it be just as simple as picking up doing extra dog walks, or tidying up after myself, but also the concern that she had that if and when and would I ever get better, how long would this last? And then there was
yeah,
obviously the financial concern she had as well, because yeah, I was off work, but I was in a privileged position that I had 6 months that I could utilize, that I was paid at full pay. But when that clock started ticking and I got to 3 months, and then it's quite clear I wasn't getting any better, and it's 4 or 5 months, and I said, we initially had the conversation, don't worry about it if you're not well enough to go back to work. But it became quite evident that we needed that money and I had to go back to work. So, and another support was my manager within that workplace where I was at that point, but he was, even though I wasn't ready to go back to work after 6 months, that he really made sure I was supported. As he said, that HR are crap, but I'm here for you and I will support you even if they don't, even if this is not the right thing for me to do. And obviously, he had to make sure that I was, I was a manager, so I was meant to be looking after other people. So I had to build back up to that, make sure I scheduled in lots of rest breaks and such like. But going back to work it was the right thing to do. Because it got me back out there from a social aspect, I suppose, as well. But I had to do it from a financial aspect, and take the burden on in that level of concern away from Sarah. So, it's
yeah.
difficult to see somebody else that's having to look after you and pick everything else up and look after the family as a whole, and they don't know if you're going to get better, the person they love. So
Yeah. Yeah,
difficult.
exactly. It can't be an easy thing watching someone that you care about go through something like that. And, it's not exactly sunshine and roses going through it yourself either.
No.
But yeah, I think, we do forget, I think, to care for the carers. So um let's talk a little bit. You said that you'd taken those 6 months and that, you've had the understanding GP, you got onto the Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland who were helpful. What was there anything else that you kind of did in that period, to sort of be like sort of desperately trying to find something that would help you to feel better?
Yes, the first thing that I did was start oxygen therapy, which is not available through the NHS. But there's an amazing charity called Compass that have a facility in Edinburgh, and they've got a hyperbaric chamber. And I had no awareness of them at all. I posted on LinkedIn that I wasn't well, and there was a lady that I used to work with, Anna, got in touch with me, messaged me privately, and she used to work for Compass, and she made me aware of the facility there. And they look after and support a lot of people with neurological conditions and chronic fatigue, ME, fibromyalgia. But over the last few years, they've seen a sharp increase in the number of long COVID people that have gone along. So the initial protocol was, I think it was 20 sessions within 5 weeks. So, and then after that, I dropped it down to doing 1 or 2 sessions a week for another month or so. But I believe that initial protocol and that period, I think I did 28 sessions within, 3 months or such like. I believe that was a real catalyst for, turning things around and starting to feel like I was moving in the right direction. I had to learn about breath work. I had to learn about pacing, and no matter what I did, and if I was to give advice to anybody else or looking back and giving myself advice, pacing would be fundamental for anything that I did. I was gifted a Fitbit for my birthday in September 2023, and I put on there the heart rate monitor so I could view what my heart rate was. And I saw somewhere that you should keep your heart rate under 55% of the max heart rate. So for me, that was 95 beats per minute. So people can work out my age if they try and do the maths from that. But it's like 220 minus your age, and then 55% of that max. And if you can keep that level or try and maintain that level, then you can minimize the number of crashes you have. And the theory which I read or saw on YouTube was that if you have a crash, then you're reactivating the virus. And I was like, well, I want to stop reactivating the virus. So if I can do that and try and minimize the number of crashes, as difficult as this is, try to keep my heart rate under 95, which was never possible. But I did my utmost to do that. And I believe that was a big factor, as I say. So pacing and just being aware of how much I did, breath work. These are things that I started trying to get my head around. But I think somebody said pacing is an art, not a science. So it's not a linear path, that's for sure. So yeah, it was there was I think I've worked out there was about 50 different supplements or protocols that I tried within the period when I was impacted by long COVID. But fundamentally pacing, as I say, breath work. But going back to the oxygen therapy was the first thing I did in Compass. It was just so much support and so much care that they had within that facility as well. So I've written a book about my journey impacted by long COVID for that 15-month period, and I'm going to give 50% of the profits for that for any of the sales to Compass to try and help them out moving forward.
I love that because it's that idea of giving back a little bit, isn't it? Where you can. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, that's beautiful. And I think, you talked about pacing, it's something, I can't remember your exact words, but you said that you weren't very good at it to start
yeah,
with. And I think like, who is? We all get introduced to pacing, don't we? And we certainly for me, I did not understand how much less I needed to do in order to stop that kind of boom bust cycle. I was a pro at booming and busting, because as soon as I started feeling slightly better, I wanted to get out there and use all my energy for something that made me smile, which inevitably then, I would be hitting the deck straight away afterwards because I just didn't have that discipline.
mm,
And then once you do then realize that there is discipline involved in it. But also, it's not it is so difficult to do because the condition is so fluctuating, isn't it? Is that what you meant when you said it was sort of an art form rather than a science? It's that kind of
yes,
you got to go with it kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. I tried to track, I think on a couple of occasions, I think that was one of the things that I got emailed through to me from Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland was a tracking. It was like a diary when you track your
Mm.
symptoms and track your energy levels, and you mark it red, amber, and green. And I did this for 2 weeks and looked at these two A4 bits of paper, and I just thought, well, there's loads of red, amber, and green, and when I do too much, then I've got no energy off the back of that. So that's not really a surprise. That hasn't helped me at all. I've just wasted a lot of energy trying to track my energy levels. So I found it more beneficial just to be in the moment and track where I was at that particular point. I would go into Tesco, and if my heart rate was at 95 beats per minute, then I would just have to stand still and just wait for it to drop down a little bit more. And quite often going in there, because it was far too much stimulation, when the lights and the noise and moving about, then it would be, the heart rate would go up. And that's why my stepdaughter coming with me was amazing, helping me through that. So yeah, it really is an art rather than a science, and it was just finding that way. I try to use a visible app as well, for a period, and I think it's improved quite a lot because there is a wearable device that now is tied into it. But I found it quite difficult at the time because you had to put your thumb over one of the cameras on your phone, and it gave you your heart rate variability, and it gave you your resting heart rate as well. And then you could track, at the end of the day, you would track where you've done, where you've exerted yourself and how you found your energy levels. But it was just too much to do at that point. So I think the new visible app that now has a wearable actually attached to it would be amazing for anybody that's struggling with long COVID. But it was just too much of a challenge for me at that point because it just didn't tie in. So yeah, just finding a way to rest and make sure you schedule in these rest periods throughout the day. What is it, the four P's of pacing, planning, prioritizing, and then pleasure, I believe they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Like that pleasure is important. Because I think, if someone had said to me, what gives you pleasure? I'd have been like, oh, climbing hills, going out running, I'd have said all the big things. And then, you look at your pacing and you're like, well, I can't do hill walking. I can't even get off my bed. So therefore, there's nothing that can give me pleasure, and it's all rubbish. And then, you get into that kind of like downward spiral of everything being, just really awful. And I think one of the things that really helped me was to really understand that, yeah, okay, there's great pleasure in doing big things, but actually it's those little things that are the really important ones. What are the little things that make you smile? So then you don't feel like you're giving up so much, because basically is what it is, isn't it? In order to pace, you have to give up the stuff that you want to do in
Yeah.
order to conserve energy for getting better. It's a really crappy equation. But then if you kind of reframe that kind of, okay, well, the big stuff will come, but right now, what are those little things that I want to do and that I can do if I'm actually successful with my pacing? Because we do, it's hard to find anything that makes you smile even a little bit, isn't it, when everything is just so awful, because it's absolutely dreadful when you're ill. um, so you said that you went back to work and your boss sounds amazing. It sounds like they were really, really helpful to you. And even though you sort of weren't quite ready to go back, they seemed to make it as good as they possibly could have done for you.
Yes.
Um, so how did that kind of go? And how did your sort of recovery go after that? Did you find that you really struggled when you went back to work, or did it actually go better than you thought? How did that go?
It was a challenge for sure. And my manager, although he was extremely supportive, there was pressure put on him for me to be able to do more because I was a team manager within an office, so I'm meant to be looking after other people. But I could hardly look at a computer screen for any length of time. I couldn't have conversations for any length of time because I could feel my system shutting down. I could feel, this cognitive shutdown where my brain and my body were just not cooperating. So I'd be having a conversation, I'd have to pull back, and not be able to carry on. But what I did learn was that, breathing exercises, being able to take myself away, and I was also blessed that I could take my car into the office. So there was really limited parking spaces, but I could say that I had a temporary medical condition, and I was in the office for, I think it was initially, I think for the first month I didn't go in, and then I had to go in, and it was just once a week, and then I went up to twice a week, and then it did highlight that the improvements that I was making, that's for sure. But also having my car in the office meant that at my lunch break I could go down to my car and I could have a wee rest, and I could do non-sleep deep rest and listen to binaural beats and just put my sleep mask on and close my eyes for 20 minutes or such like, and just recharge to an extent. Um, so yeah, it was difficult. There's no doubt about it, and I had real doubts I was going to be able to carry on and do my job. And I look back at my journal entries as well for that time period, and I didn't know how I was going to be able to look after people because I was really struggling to even look after myself. But I found a way eventually. Um, and it was just a case of just perseverance, I suppose. And as I say, the breathing exercises made a real difference. And obviously, I did end up. I wouldn't be sitting here being able to have this conversation today if I wasn't better. But I think I went back to work in March, and it wasn't until I believe around about the middle of the end of September that I was fully recovered. So, but as I say, for these first probably 4 months when I was back, that was a real challenge. Um, but yeah, I got through it. As you say, my boss, not to give him too much of a big head, but he was extremely supportive, as were everybody else that I worked with, which were just so kind. And it's amazing when you go back to work and people see you and go, "You look so well. Can't believe you were off." And you're just thinking, I might look well, but that's just because I've lost weight because I haven't been able to do anything for the past 6 months. And even the act of eating is tiring. So you're not getting enough nutrition, and you're definitely not getting any exercise. So you've lost weight, and people think, "Oh, you look better, you look amazing." And you're like, "I don't feel it." So, but yeah, everybody was lovely. So I was very lucky in that respect, that I had such a supportive community in the workplace.
Yeah. And it sounds like you were able to quite well manage that kind of return where, you started off not going in and then you went in sort of 1 day a week and then you went in your 2 days and you were able to kind of build that up very gradually, but also being, actually it sounds like you were incredibly disciplined about doing your rest periods, doing your breathing exercises and making sure that you did build them in. So despite the fact that, you were maybe returning to work a little earlier than you would have liked to,
Mm.
you were making it work by fitting all the good stuff in around the stuff that you had to do. And obviously the really supportive work environment was probably very key to that as well. So you did feel like you were able to. Um, so yeah, it's very gratifying to hear. You hear about people needing to return to work because of finances or because they're going to lose their job or, there's so many pressures. And, there's always that concern of, well, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. And actually, you weren't ready either, but actually, you did manage it. So it is possible,
Yeah.
which is really awesome to hear. I think there'll be people listening who maybe are having similar concerns. So yeah, it's really great to hear that did actually work for you. Um, so you said it took you a bit of time to sort of build back up to the work, and then it was later in the year. So what did that kind of final recovery period look like? When you were sort of like, oh, I'm fully recovered. What did that look like? What did was it a sudden thing? Was it a gradual thing? Where was that moment of realization? And how did you know? We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm just jumping in for a second to see if you're enjoying this episode. If you're finding it useful, maybe you would consider sharing it somewhere, a friend, a group, or even on your Twitter feed. If everyone was able to share just once, we'd be able to get this information out to even more people who really, really need it. So please consider sharing somewhere if you possibly can. I hope you enjoy the episode, and thank you so much.
Good question. It was gradual. So there was
Mm.
a period there, as I say, when I went back to work, probably about 4 months, when I was managing the condition, and I looked into peptides was the big thing which I then implemented. And don't get me wrong, I was also utilising methylene blue, urolithin A, is it rhodiola roseo, I think it's called. But goodness knows how many other supplements I've tried. Um, but I cleaned up my diet. I'd made sure that things that were overstimulating for my system, I'd cut out quite early on. So alcohol, I realised that wasn't helping me. Not that I drank too much in the first instance. I don't want to give people the wrong impression, but I had to cut it out. So even half a glass of wine, I realised I was just feeling terrible afterwards. So I just cut it out. Caffeine, I had to cut out. Music, I had to cut out. So all these things that were just overstimulating. So yeah, I had been managing it for that period, and then I started trying peptides. I'd read about one that was for mitochondrial support that's called MOT-SC. And I tried that for about 4 or 5 weeks, and that was something I'd noticed after I'd taken that. It was a weekly injection, and after about 4 weeks, I'd noticed that I was able to do quite a lot. Like I walked the dog for an hour, and then I went for a shower, and then I went to the hairdressers, and I did all that back to back. And my heart rate got up to 140 beats per minute. And I still remember the day when I spoke to my eldest stepdaughter in the afternoon, and I actually said to her, "This is the best I've felt in a year." And I'm definitely not fully recovered at that stage. I was nowhere near it, because I was exhausted by the evening, and I could still feel that the fatigue was there, and the brain fog to an extent. But I said to her at that point, I could live like this. This is so much better than I was. And then I tried other ones that were more for immune support over the next, probably 4 to 8 weeks. And it was definitely a gradual process. And I think the main thing is you don't know when you're fully recovered, and you don't trust your body, because your body just hasn't felt the same for such a long period of time. That normal has been your previous one of the big things from a mindset perspective is realizing that the normal you had before you got unwell doesn't exist anymore. And you had to just accept that this is a new normal. But then when you get to the stage that you're fully recovered, you're back to a different kind of normal, and it's not the one that you were before, because you've had been through this whole journey, and you've had to, learn so much about your body and be far more mindful, and you're unable to be athletic as you were prior to becoming unwell. So yeah, it just takes a while to, build that confidence and that courage to start being able to go out and do things, and potentially start exercising, and then you realize that you're able to sit and have conversations for a period of time, or sit in front of a computer or whatever. So yeah, it takes a while, but when you do, it's building that confidence, as I say, is the main thing.
Yeah, and I sort of had this experience, and I've heard other people say similar, where they sort of, they're doing better and better and better, and you don't really notice that day to day because maybe the improvements are so small or barely noticeable day to day, but you're just starting to do more and feel better and integrate more into life, and then it's that kind of for me it was like, oh, actually I think I've been okay for a wee bit now. But certainly for me, I had to like sit with that for a bit because I was like, I didn't trust it. I thought, I felt a bit better before, like I know what happens next.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say anything. So I kind of had to just keep quiet and be like, okay, am I still okay? Am I still okay? Am I still okay? And eventually it was when I was like, okay, yeah, we're good. But it's almost that, yeah, building confidence back in your own body, isn't it? And that trust, because when you get unwell with something like this, you lose all trust in your body because it doesn't do what you're expecting of it, and what you have expected of it for your entire life, and it's generally done what it's told, and then suddenly the whole house of cards comes down, isn't it? So yeah, it sounds like you yeah, sort of gradually eased into it, which is really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I know when you realize you haven't had a crash and the number of days and weeks and months that have gone past that you haven't had a crash, and you the post-exertional malaise isn't rearing its ugly head for a period of
yeah,
time, and you're able to get out and about and do a number of things, and you're still having to rest because that doesn't pass for a period of time. But it's just because for me personally, I wasn't well for 15 months. So I wasn't able to do anything for 15 months. So I'd lost all this level of fitness. Um, so yeah, of course I was having to rest, but that is the kind of confusing part, that you're in such bad shape afterwards that this is you're not clear if you're fully recovered, but you do realize you're just out of shape, as opposed to actually having something that's been such an impact to yourself for a period of time.
yeah. And then it's that case of gradually, I think I said to myself, I'm not an ill person anymore. I'm an unfit person. But the
Yeah,
thing for me, I'd never been an unfit person in my life, so I didn't really know how to be an unfit person. So I sort of had to look up how to do that. But it's the most wonderful problem to have, isn't it? When you get to that point where you think, actually, my problem here is the D word. It is that I'm deconditioned. It's not that I'm sick. It is actually that because I haven't been able to do things for so long, I now do have to kind of regain my fitness. And yeah, I think it's the best problem in the world. It feels so good, doesn't it, to
yeah,
have like sore muscles.
yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely, and it's building up that it's having a different view of what exercise is. So
mm,
you know, just being able to do one push up, or instead of having to sit down on a shower stool in the shower, or sit down
yeah,
as you're on the edge of the bath as you're brushing your teeth, you're able to stand up. And then next thing, you maybe I do a mindfulness practice that I stand on one foot as I'm brushing my teeth. It's partly mindfulness, it's partly to improve my balance because my balance is so rubbish. And my wife looks at me like, look at the state of what I'm married. But I'm standing there on one foot. But I had to build up to that. And that is now, and also building up from doing one push up or one body weight squat, and just realizing, well, this is where I'm at. I'm lucky that I'm actually able to do this amount of exercise in the first place, and increase progressively, increase up, upon that. So yeah, it's slow for sure, but it's amazing.
yeah, yeah. It's that increasing things in a quote unquote normal way.
Yeah,
In yeah, which is as you say, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do after so long of not. Um, so I think maybe finally I would say what advice would you give yourself, from this position of having come through? What do you think Ivor from before, from while he was ill would have wanted to hear? or needed to hear, maybe.
Yeah, maybe not wanted to hear. I think it's just being aware of the fundamentals and the foundations. And, we mentioned before about pacing. It was foreign to me. Utilizing non-sleep deep rest, doing these breathing exercises. I would have put these fundamentals in place a lot sooner. Cleaning up my diet, making sure I limited the amount of sugar and caffeine and alcohol and overstimulation, whether that's music or light or the TV or whatever, and just not thinking that was better in that first instance. After that first 6 weeks, when the antibiotics kicked in, I think I would have taken it a lot slower and been far more aware of that if I could have spoken to myself at that point, it was like, listen, don't go out and rip up that plant, and take it a lot slower and just be a lot more aware of the the ongoing impact you could have. But yeah, the foundational stuff, the fundamentals, putting that in place, the breathing exercises and not overdoing it, and non-sleep deep rest and vagus nerve work that I did as well. That's the stuff that makes the biggest difference. And obviously further down the line, I tried peptides, and I would have done them a lot sooner rather than waiting over a year to introduce them. So there was big ticket items, and not flinging so much money at so many different supplements that probably didn't make any difference, but you don't know at the time because you're just trying to find the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's finding the things that make the biggest difference and then consistently doing them, I
Yep.
think. And those things are subtly different for different people. But it's finding what that is for you. Yeah. Amazing. Ivor, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story, for chatting to me, for sharing some hope and some ideas. It's been amazing connecting with you and chatting and hearing your story. If anyone wants to connect with you or to buy your book, I will make sure that those links go into the show notes. So do go and check that out if you're interested. And yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much to all of my guests, and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.